Decades ago, when I was on a modeling budget, I wanted passenger cars to add to my Southern Pacific roster. The brass models seemed much too expensive, and the plastic cars seemed substandard back then. I stumbled across AHM plastic cars that were smooth-side streamliner cars that looked like something from the 1940 era. I think they came out in the late 1970s. They were essentially low-priced cars imported from Italy. They were quite remarkable in many ways. The downside was cheap trucks and couplers. The couplers were mounted on the trucks, Talgo style. These cars I've had for a long time recently had new Walther Trucks installed. These are 80-foot long cars. The baggage and tavern car are the exception. They all needed lots of added detail to look convincing, and as I bought them they had different railroad paint schemes requiring stripping and repainting. All the grab irons needed fabricating and installing. The windows are all real glass, cut from microscope slide cover slips, and they are extremely thin. They have a much better reflective look than using plastic or acetate stock. These cars still need the truck's airbrushed silver, and they badly need diaphragms between the cars. That's yet to come. Most of the details added were generic to cars like this, from looking at grainy magazine photos. Even magazines have better printing since those days. Most of it was guesswork at my workbench. So over time I built up a train of 7 cars and painted them in SP's Sunset Limited colors. I just liked it better than the daylight scheme. These Sunset cars had an understated elegance. Today there are now more books with many views of these and other SP passenger cars. Most of these AHM cars have added interior detailing using cast metal seats from the old Walther's catalog. I added the long radio antenna mounted on the roof centerline to 4 of them. As I recall, this was for onboard entertainment they could pick up from AM radio stations. FM radio from 88 to 108 megahertz didn't exist back in the 1940s yet. FM stations, being VHF or very high frequency, don't have anything even close to the range of AM radio at any rate. Even in Southern California, I can easily get AM clear channel stations such as KOA in Denver, KKOB in Albuquerque, and KRVN in Nebraska at night with a good radio. The red light cluster on the observation lounge car roof was fabricated from bits of brass tubing and blended into the roof outline. It doesn't light yet, but now that I have replaced the trucks, again with Walther's Trucks, I can eventually wire them up to tiny LEDs inside. These new trucks have a built-in wiring capability. I bought them at a sale. They are also available in silver, and that would have been more correct for this train. I'll change that with an airbrushing someday soon. The AHM trucks were first replaced with metal trucks from GSB long ago. They looked great, but once I finally built a layout, I discovered they shorted out and had other issues when running them around on the track. These became shelf-only models for many years, until I noticed the Walther's trucks about a year ago. These Walther's trucks come in many styles, including 6-wheel versions. The silver 6-wheel type was used on this baggage car. They are excellent trucks and fairly priced. It takes a bit of ingenuity to mount them to these AHM cars. I milled the truck pedestals down to the floor level and fitted brass threaded inserts. I have seen these in hardware stores in several sizes. I pressed them in with heat from a soldering iron tip into pre-drilled undersized holes. A drop of ACC glue helps too. Don't get it in the interior threads though. The mounting hole in the trucks I chose was just a little under 1/4 of an inch in diameter, so I used some fiber step washers to shim that down to use an 832 brass machine screw that fit into the inserts. I used 8-32 PEM nuts to act like jam nuts against the threaded inserts to create a locking effect and yet allow about 30 thousandths of an inch vertical play in the trucks. Since the wheelbase is rigid, you need to allow the trucks to rock fore and aft for good tracking. The rounded end of the PEM nut rests on the threaded insert to allow a little bit of spherical freedom and yet ride with stability on level, straight track. I always put a very thin flat washer between the PEM nut face and the face of the brass insert. This acts as a smoother rubbing interface, and I can always use extra washers on one or both ends to get the ride height level and the coupler height exact. It took lots of experimenting to get it all sorted out, but I figured out that this scheme was all adjustable. I used a dot of Elmer's wood glue in the threaded insert, so when I screwed the trucks in it would act like a soft Loctite to prevent loosening from vibration. The window shades are just bits of very thin frosted sheet mylar. This is the type draftsmen used to make drawings with pen and ink back in the day. Some of the details on the diner were easy to fabricate from brass tubing and solder pieces together to form these kitchen smoke vents. I think I copied them from a roof photo on a Union Pacific diner from that same era. Some of these cars had their doors cut at the bottom to reveal the internal stair steps. These were metal cast steps from Walther's back in the 1950s through 1970s or thereabout. The steps were metal castings bonded with epoxy into notches into the floor pan. You might notice them here when the bottom of the car is shown to explain the truck mounting method. I used the longest coupler shanks I could buy from Katie and set the box back so the knuckle was in the original location. This gives more accommodation or swing to these long cars going around curves. Most of my main line is 36-inch radius or more, and it all works pretty well. The switches are all number 8. The biggest problem, oddly enough, is through number 8 curved switches, so the longer shanks are a big help. I like these cars. I even converted a sleeper car into a tavern car. It can also double as an automat car. That required chopping up and blanking out the center windows on both sides. The car was also shortened to 78 feet. Now that these cars can run without derailing, I need to paint the trucks silver and outfit the cars with diaphragms. Diaphragms that don't cause derailments. I think I'll settle on the old MHP units. They are neoprene bellows and very flexible. Sadly, they are no longer made, so I have been picking them up at various model railroad swap meet sales. Thanks for watching, and check into cspmovies.com for DVD videos on prototype railroads.